Hello there, Scrub Lords, and welcome to another episode of Devblog Chats. This is your host, Many Miles Away, and today we're going to be going over the history and development of the T-54 and T-55 series of vehicles, as well as my thoughts on the vehicle and where it will fit in within War Thunder's Tier 5 Soviet tech tree. So the development of the T-54/55 goes back to the end of World War II, where the Soviets were looking to improve upon their much-praised T-34-85. Throughout the Second World War, the Soviets had come to realize that there were a few problems with their current tank designs. While they were cheap and effective, there was always room for improvement, and the T-34 suffered from a few serious issues, of which there were three. The gun was not powerful enough to take on the late-war German armor like Panther in both versions of the Tiger, outside of 600 meters. The turret ring was too small to effectively fit large-caliber guns like the 100mm LB-1 and D-10S, mounted on the Su-100, and the armor layout was nowhere near sufficient to even compare to the German late-war machines, as well as the current configuration causing structural issues. Long story short, the numerous experiments with updating and improving the T-34 led to the development of various T-44 programs that started as early as 1940. Despite similar names, the T-44 was a complete redesign of the T-34, which got rid of the sloped sides and rear armor layout of the vehicle, which allowed an increase in the size of the turret ring. In addition, they also ditched the cumbersome space-consuming Christie suspension system, with a more modern torsion bar arrangement featuring 5 road wheels per side with no return rollers. To decrease the size of the engine compartment, they also fitted it with a new V44 12-cylinder 4-stroke diesel engine, which was mounted transversely connected to an 8-speed transmission. The engine produced 520 horsepower and gave the tank a top speed of 60 km per hour or 37 miles per hour. Out of the many experiments with different armaments developed for the T-44, the 100mm gun variant seemed to show the most promise, and led to the development of the T-54 first prototype. The T-54 incorporated numerous improvements to the T-44 design, such as a new cast turret, and the incorporation of the 100mm D-10T. In addition, armor was increased from 90mm to 120mm and became known in Soviet service as the T-54-1 in 1946. Throughout the vehicle's early life, it incorporated numerous changes to it, such as improvements in ammunition, and the addition of a larger, more rounded turret, which allowed an only slightly greater range of movement within the already cramped turret design. However, one of the principal weaknesses of the T-54 was its lack of both nuclear and biological warfare survivability. As a result, yet another development program was started in 1955 to bring the T-54 up to MBC standards. In 1956, the KB-60 MBC filtration system was installed into the T-54, along with improvements to the engine in the form of a brand new V55 12-cylinder 4-stroke 1-chamber 38.88-liter water-cooled diesel engine pumping out 581 brake horsepower to cope with the additional weight. Wow, that's a mouthful. In addition to this, it was equipped with the new STP-1 Gorizont stabilization system and an improved powered turret traverse mechanism for faster gun laying. This improved variant became redesignated as the T-55 and later the T-55A, with yet further improvements to its radiation shielding. Including production runs by the Czechs and the Poles, the T-54/55 has become the most produced tank in history, with a staggering total of 85,500-ish machines built, beating out its legendary predecessor, the T-34, by a mere 1,500 machines at 84,000 units. Now we get to how you can identify the two vehicles outside of War Thunder. First, I want to clarify that the addition of a fume extractor is not how you identify a T-55 or a T-54 in real life. A T-54 is identified by the addition of a large radiator housing on the roof of the turret, as seen in this picture. The T-55 will not have this radiator housing, since the air filtration is done through the NBC system installed on said vehicles. Within War Thunder, however, they can be easily identified by the addition of a fume extractor on the end of the barrel, because none of the previous T-54s, as of currently, have a fume extractor added to the end of their barrels, so within War Thunder, it's pretty easy to differentiate them. Just look for the slightly thicker gun barrel or muzzle. Now, I realize that the story I have given on the development of the T-54 and T-55 is massively simplified. If you go back and read through all of the different variants that they went through, I would be here for like another hour or so. And so this was a very, very short and condensed version, so that way you guys could get up to speed on the development history as fast as possible. In any case, I know I missed a few things, so if you feel that I missed something particularly important, please put it down in the comment section below, so that way I can highlight it and bring it to the attention of other viewers. Anyways, moving on to its potential uses within War Thunder and its potential placement, there is some debate on whether or not this vehicle is going to be before or after the T-62. You would imagine beforehand, since it's essentially an upgraded T-54. However, based on what we're seeing with its potential ammunition types that Gaijin have hinted at, we might actually see this thing become more powerful than the T-62. And the reason I say this is because the T-54 is just as fast as the T-62. They're essentially the same hulls, with slight variations on the shape and so on. They have around the same speed. They have around the same maneuverability. The gun is different, of course. It's a 100mm D10 TS rifled gun, and in this case, it has a stabilizer on it and increased turret traverse, like I mentioned earlier. And the addition of a stabilizer and increased turret traverse solves one of the two major, well, actually solves both of the major issues with the T-54, other than its poor gun depression and reverse speed, which is sort of like taken for granted. However, like I said, the T-55A potentially solves both of the major issues with the T-54. Poor turret traverse and no stabilizer, especially at a tier where pretty much every other MBT at top tier is fitted with one nowadays. Of course, there are vehicles like the M60 and the Leopard 1 and the STB-1, and a few other variants of vehicles that do not have stabilizers that are at 8.0. However, the T-54 is essentially World War II technology taken to the extreme. It's everything that the Russians have sort of learned from the Second World War. All of their manufacturing techniques, all of their combat and battlefield lessons. They wanted a gun that was bigger, that could potentially take on much heavier tanks. They wanted a gun that would basically punch well above its weight. And they wanted to keep the weight down and the profile low, so that way it was a much harder to hit target while moving across the Russian steppes, where the Russians had potentially intended to be fighting. In addition to this, Gaijin hinted at the introduction of a new HEAT-FS shell and AP-FSDS round, which would give the T-55A a massive potential increase in firepower over its previous T-54 variants. The AP-FSDS round alone, if it turns out to be the ammunition type Gaijin is hinting at, will be able to perforate 430mm of flat armor at 1 kilometer. And if you do the math on that, it brings its total penetration to be upwards of 460mm of armor at point-blank range. And the way AP-FSDS is set up in War Thunder is that it almost never ricochets. It either penetrates or it doesn't. Personally, I would not be very happy if this thing got a more powerful shell than the top-tier T-62. However, considering the potential firepower of NATO vehicles already, like the Chieftain and the L7 armed vehicles firing HEAT-FS, this wouldn't be anything too out of the ordinary. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this quick overview of the T-55A on Devblog Chats. Keep your tracks checked, keep your binos in place, keep around the tube, and leave your comments down below about what you think of this T-55A and what it could potentially do to the Tier 5 matchmaking. I'll see you guys on the next one.